Welcome to the Fashion Situation Room, a podcast from the front lines of the fashion industry. I'm your host, Michael Jordan, and these are my two co-hosts.
Hello, I'm Britta Cabanos.
And hey there, I'm Peter McLaughlin.
In this podcast, we offer you real talk about what impacts the fashion industry, particularly through the 4 S's: strategy, sustainability, storytelling, and solutions. With our finger on the pulse of the most meaningful business trends, which we'll also bring to life with impactful guests along the way, we aim to provide you with actionable insights that will benefit you. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fashion Situation Room. I'm your host, Michael Jordan, along with my co-hosts, Britta Cabanos and Peter McLaughlin.
Hello,
Hi, everyone.
Nowadays, we talk a lot about sustainability and circularity in fashion, but we speak far less often about how exactly to make it work in real life, day to day, across businesses, across cultures, and across systems. So I'm especially pleased to welcome our guest today, Tricia Langman. Please join us, Tricia. Hello there.
Hi, Trish.
Hey, Trish.
Trish is a sustainability strategist and educator who spent more than 15 years working at the intersection of design, policy, and systems change, advising the United Nations, building circular economy training programs around the world, and helping both emerging designers and global organizations rethink how fashion operates. Today, she's managing partner at Hecho por Nosotros, where she explores one of the most fascinating frontiers in this space: how AI and digital tools can work with artisanal ancestral knowledge, not against it, to create more regenerative and equitable systems. So let's dive right in. I'll ask the first question, please, which is, Trish, I always want our episodes to be as accessible and welcoming as possible, whether the audience are professionals in the field or newcomers. Even for the pros, they sometimes need friendly reminders. So I'm curious to ask you, big picture, why does all this matter? Why is it important? Why should the audience care about these issues? And specifically, why exactly should we even pay attention to the work that an organization like Hecho por Nosotros, which I should have translated to, made by us? Why should we even pay attention to the meaningful work that you're doing there? Please go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Great to be here. I think, I'm an educator. I think you can never have too much education. The work I do around sustainability is, to help the future generations. I'm an educator. I think about, people, informing people so that we can make the world better. I think that, the work that I do with Hecho por Nosotros concentrates a lot on artisanal and ancient wisdom, things that are often being forgotten, skills that have been forgotten as we, head and spiral and, into go forward into the 21st century. I think that, it's really important to learn from the past as well as we move forward, which is why I'm so, unlike most people, I don't think AI is a bad thing. I feel like there's an integration that can happen. So I think that just thinking about it as a big picture, I think we need to care because, obviously, as we move forward with technology, as we become a place where there's 10 billion people that are going to be here, we have to think about the resources. And we currently don't have enough resources. The weather is unpredictable. And so we need to really think about how we can make ourselves sustainable as a planet and in our local communities. People think of things globally, but I am very much a proponent of localization. And so looking at what you have locally and how you can preserve it and sustain it so that, we can learn from each other, the different communities that are around the world.
And just to clarify, with Hecho por Nosotros, your members, your partners are primarily located where?
Latin America, Africa, and India. We do work with other places, but primarily we work in Argentina, northern Argentina, Peru, around the Andes. Adriana Marina, our fantastic founder, she has a farm down in Patagonia. She's worked with over, I think, 3,000 artisans. And also in India, we've had many projects. And in Africa, West Africa and Ghana, which is my heritage. We've done some work, and also Kenya as well.
And just as you're talking, I'm showing on the screen your website. Hopefully it'll spark some interest among our audience. But thank you for that introduction. Britta, go ahead. What did you want to ask Trish?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think Peter, you had something to start with
Yeah,
first.
because
I'll pass it to
yeah,
you.
Sorry about
thank
that. Yes.
Yeah, as a fellow designer, like, because my background is also in design, I was curious that because you work across design, policy, education, and technology, what needs to change at a systems level for sustainable fashion to move from niche to the norm?
Yeah, this is a huge subject. I don't know if I can
Yeah.
cover all of it. Um, I think we need to build sustainability into company policy rather than it being just sort of a nice to have thing. I think a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a real momentum for companies to, and incentives for companies to kind of think about sustainability, having sustainability managers and directors. I think now we may have been sidelined a little bit,
Hmm.
but I think in terms of systems, if you're thinking of system level change, we need to kind of give incentives governmentally to companies so that it's worth their while. Having some subsidies on trainings, you know, um, you know, getting companies to think about system-wide solutions. It's very hard for a big company to implement a sustainable initiative across the whole of their value chain, but you can make small incremental changes, just in your logistics, just in your transportation, that can add up to something huge. That's not going to come, when people sort of shout out at those big companies. There are jobs at stake, people's livelihoods. They cannot just change over time. But what you can do is, in order to, accelerate that, is to have some government policy and incentives to help that. And also some increased collaboration amongst brands and governments and educators. I see that, in many colleges, the up and coming generation are very, very well versed in sustainability, which is great to see. Those are the future design directors that are going to be out there. And I think that, if we kind of think in terms of educating people, if we think in terms of government, if we think in terms of businesses all coming together as collaboration, then I think we could get somewhere. I mean, we all have to sort of talk to other. Collaboration is key, I think.
Well,
And also just making it more accessible in terms of, many companies still not knowing where to start.
I mean, because that's the thing. Like, whenever you're talking about like the business aspect of it, ultimately you also mentioned how there is limited resources, and that therefore by introducing circularity, you're reusing those resources. So if the resources are limited, ultimately businesses should pay attention, because this is then, rather, as you point out, as a nice to have, it's more to do with then risk management, because if they don't have the resources, they can't make the product. So ultimately it really feeds into their supply chain, no?
Yeah, it does. There's issues with circularity, which of implementation that goes with that. Because it looks nice on paper, you just get the things back, but sorting is very expensive. Separating fibers is very expensive. If they're not the same fiber, it gets costly. But there are ways to kind of mitigate that, and I think that companies, like I said, they don't have necessarily access to the education. So that the design directors and the people making the decision makers understand that sustainability can be profitable. It's not just about I think they're scared because the bottom line is always there, the risk as well. But if they had access to tools and the education, this is some of the work we do at Hecho and Nosotros, then perhaps I think, they'll understand that there is profit there, Now I understand business as much as I do design, and there's ways around it. I think it's just getting them to listen and taking the fear out of it, basically, for companies.
Don't you think that if they're investing in those programs and those resources now, like it might take a little bit longer to see the results and the benefits, but in the long run, isn't that what we're going for? Is, to see those results in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we are, but we're hard built in business to think about returns
Yeah,
that
profit.
come, yeah, instantly. And so, there are businesses for good that think, ahead. But I think this comes down to our kind of human behavior and the way we've set up. I've had this conversation many a times. A country is successful if it has a high GDP, but a country may, have a really good sustainable initiatives, work with nature, and have maybe not have a high GDP, but people are happier. And that's
Healthier.
not really considered. It's how much profit
Yeah.
that you make.
Yeah.
And so that kind of way of thinking is inbuilt, basically. It's been built into you when you go to business school as well,
Yeah.
And so, it's hard for people to get away. There are companies moving away from that, thinking about, balancing out, what they do with business and the impacts that it has to their communities and to the world.
Yeah.
Just to go on top of that, sorry, Britta, just to go on
Yeah.
top of that to explain to the listeners what that means, because it's true. There was, and of course, there was 5 countries, I believe, that were all run by women. So it was like Scotland, New Zealand,
Yeah.
and so they were really measuring the happiness, and therefore so really the complete society rather than
Yeah.
purely the
Yeah.
GDP.
A holistic view. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, because if you're only doing the GDP, then that means like you could say the amount of cars that are bought, but ultimately they don't measure then the amount of emissions, how that affects the smog, how then that affects the healthcare, how many people are hospitalized
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
bad air.
Exactly.
So I'm just trying to put it in context so that people understand
Yeah.
what then that means, what is measured money wise, but then not measuring the effects of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Our systems thinking needs to change. And Adriana, our founder, is always talking about, systemic change. It's just the way that we think. And that, like I said, it always goes back to education, how you educate, how you educate people who are going to be the next decision makers, So if you want change, you need to start there, definitely.
Just if
So,
I know, Britta, you're about to ask something, and if I may, just to quickly follow up with Trish about that, we are also emphasizing in this podcast the 4 S's: strategies, solutions, sustainability, and storytelling. And I'm wondering, I appreciate your big picture analysis describing the challenges and the benefits, but would you please share a story? I'm curious about even your organization, your membership, your clientele, a success story, let's say, where an organization was able to turn sustainability and circularity into profit somehow. What's really stands out for you, and describe how that came to be.
So a few years ago, we worked with a company called Metanet. They are based in Nigeria. And she had this very small company. We started to run incubators. We ran one in Mexico. We ran one in India, and a few in Africa. And she was a small business, and I think some of the issues that we saw there are issues that come with many small business, because I've worked with secular businesses on the West Coast and in the United States. And there were some basic things. I mean, she was working with the community. So basically, water hyacinth is a weed that grows around the world, but it's not indigenous to Nigeria, but it basically it's very invasive, and it blocks up waterways. And so basically you can't fish, you can't do anything. One of the things that we did, as she did, was to cultivate this weed and make a biomaterial from it. But she wasn't making any profit. She wasn't, maybe utilizing all of the things that she had, resources that were available in her area. So we came in and we used people from all over the world to put together a really great team of people who work with biomaterials, people who work, some ex-MIT people, a few other people. And we had a panel of people that would meet with her every week, I think it was. And we started out looking at her business. And, the shocking thing was that, and this happens with many small businesses, was the inventory, so much wastage. Even though she was a sustainable company, there was a ton of wastage in there in terms of too much inventory, too much production. And so we took a really good look at those numbers and managed to sort of make her think really about, business doesn't have to be scary. For some people, if you're a designer, it could be scary. I'm a big proponent of what we're called design thinking, which is innovation, conceptual innovation around human-centered design. So you kind of talk to people, basically. And so I said to her, go and talk to your clients, talk to the people about what they really want, because you're producing too much. Even though you are a smaller business, you could do with bringing down your inventory and actually taking a look at that inventory. And so we managed to kind of work out some strategies to kind of help her get her business together. A key thing was marketing as well, like having a successful website, understanding the global markets. And we were able to get her back on track, basically. She'd been running for 8 years and not really making the profit, and not seemingly just breaking even forever, And so the idea was to kind of bring in our experts to kind of accelerate and give her a jump start. And I think we did. She was now moving into working with shoes and banana skins, making her own leather and stuff. I think that, just that little bit of help from other people, that collaboration, using other people's skill sets, was really valuable, and even if it's for a short time. And I think that, again, there's a whole argument about people coming in from big NGOs and then leaving people, really, not finishing off the work that they start. And so we were really mindful of the fact that this was a complete, 6-week course that we're going to work with. And we want you to be self-sufficient afterwards. We're not coming in to kind of give you charity and then, somehow you're not able to kind of carry on without the money, without the energy, the human energy that comes in there. So for me, that was a real success story because we're able to replicate it in many other places. And it's just the idea that, when you come in as an advisor, but self-sufficiency is at the heart of it.
Yeah, that's a great story. And it kind of leads into the question that I have, which is if you don't have access to have a service like you, or, come in and work with an NGO, how do you think small and emerging brands, so I work with a lot of smaller brands or startup brands, how could they realistically integrate sustainability without excessive costs? And where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation right now?
Yeah. So, I've had this conversation with many small brands. They're like, I want to be sustainable, but biomaterials are so expensive. I can't buy all these fancy new biomaterials. And those biomaterials, by the way, are very difficult to scale. Even ones that have gotten a ton of backing in the industry. There's been talk about Circularity. If you know that story, you can look that up, about how, having backing around biomaterials doesn't always work. But I think if you're a small brand, the first thing I say to somebody when I meet with them is, okay, you're not going to kind of be able to completely overhaul everything all at once, but let's take a look at some things that you can change. Packaging is one thing that you can look at first of all. It's an easy it's an easy step, just to look at your packaging, to look at your logistics and shipping, how you can change that. That's something that you can do. I can also think about in the design process, you don't necessarily need to design for disassembly, which is basically thinking about how it's going to be dismantled and then repurposed. But there is many companies who've been thinking that way, shoe companies, if you're a small designer, people who've been making shoes, they've been a lot of experiments around that. I think that the key here is to think about the little things that you can do. Like I said, packaging, logistics, repair. If you can instigate some sort of repair service, that is one way to do it. Thinking about localizing your production. So I think that there was this whole thing, if you're a small designer, then as you scale up, you begin to take your production somewhere else because it's cheaper. And again, people are sometimes scared to think that people will pay premium price for something because it's, because it's sustainable. I think what's happened now is there's a generation coming up that is less influenced by trends. They will buy vintage, they will buy something designer. They won't necessarily think that they have to be on trend. It's more about individualization, I think, a little bit. And so with that generation coming up, I think they may be more receptive to having a garment that lasts longer, repairing it. There is an amazing place in LA called Sway Sew Shop, I think. I don't know if you've heard of it. So basically you go there, you can give them your old clothes. And basically if you go in there, they have a monthly dye bath where you can re-dye your clothes and turn it into a different outfit.
What did you think it was called?
Everything matches.
Yeah. Sway Sew Shop.
We'll have to look that up.
It's SUAY, I think.
Okay.
And they're doing some really great work. A few years I was talking to another colleague and we were saying, like, this is kind of the future, isn't it? You go in and you've got your clothes and then you can kind of change them up, swap them out.
You come out with a whole new look.
Learn to repair them and a whole load of things like that. I think it's really cool. But again, if we want to get back to small businesses, like I said, not to forget the kind of digital tools that you may need to think about for transparency. I know in Europe they've instigated things around digital passports and stuff like that. But I think that just giving your the consumer, your customer, an idea of where it comes from, telling that story around it with your digital tools and your social media, again, is a way to kind of help them understand your thinking around being sustainable. To this day, there's still people, I can go to parties with family and friends who don't understand, they don't know what circularity is. They don't know what some of these keywords that we may know are.
We just think it's part of our
vocabulary. You have to explain it.
Part of all normal vocabulary.
Yeah, you have to explain it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so for a small brand, it's just that key storytelling part is going to be crucial, to make people understand what you're doing. But like I said, those small increments of who you choose to make your clothes, how you choose to ship it, how you choose to package it, are things that you can do that can help you. Maybe you can't.
There's nothing worse than getting an eco-friendly garment and it's in a plastic wrapped bag. Exactly. Defeating the purpose of
that's the first thing I always tell people to just look at, what does it look like when somebody arrives, when it arrives on when it arrives, is it coated in plastic? Is that one thing just change immediately and it wouldn't be it's very cost effective,
You had mentioned in the beginning AI and innovation too, and there's so many tools out there that AI can help that are free or very inexpensive where you don't have to do rounds of patterns and fit sessions. And so I think small designers can really take advantage of some of these new tools that
Yeah,
are out there that will save them cost and time, in
yeah,
development.
yeah, they
There is
definitely
also
can.
some packaging like TIPA, which is like plastic bags, like poly bags that anyone who works in the industry are infamous, but they are biodegradable. They're not actually made of plastic.
Yeah,
Um, so
simple. Yeah,
yeah, there is other things out there that you can do the swap for. And ultimately, I think also for smaller brands, the fact that they are small and more nimble, they can look at their waste and what
yeah,
can they make from that? Because I know that it's not a multi-million dollar industry, but the little tchotchkes that people put on handbags,
yeah,
like that originally was just like, okay, we have all of this leather left over from the handbag. What can we make with it? And then they were able to sell it for hundreds of dollars. So innovation is the mother of
yeah.
all invention.
For
Using
sure.
their waste, it's totally those scraps. I mean, there's whole companies built on that, the scraps of fabric, dead stock, a ton of
Yeah.
stuff that you
Yeah.
can. But at the same time, like I said, I think if you are a young designer, a new designer, and you want to be known as a sustainable brand, just be transparent. Don't say you're completely sustainable when you're not. Don't greenwash it. Tell them the things that you're doing or the things you hope to do, and that's good enough, I think.
It's better than not doing
Well,
anything.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
on that note, I'd like to ask you regarding strategic communications, and you said don't greenwash it, be transparent. How important is it for companies large and small to prove their words? Okay, not just to say that they're sustainable, even partially,
yeah.
but in what form do you advise companies to prove their results, prove their impact, or prove that they're doing no harm to people, planet, animals, that sort of thing?
Yeah. It's going to be very hard to get a big company to be completely transparent, because the expectation is so high that people want people to say like I'm doing everything that's that's sustainable. And I think we need to kind of let go of that a little bit. What is that company doing specifically in the value chain? What are they doing in terms of you know transportation and logistics? What are they doing in terms of retail? There's different areas that you can kind of highlight, like I said, but don't misrepresent what you're doing. Tell the story that it's something that is aspirational. It's something that's going to happen in the future. It's you don't have to say, you don't have to greenwash it to say we are now a sustainable carbon. We've got all these initiatives when you don't really have. You have one initiative. It's really misleading for the public, and of course they get wary. And because of that, there's now, if somebody says they're sustainable, there is a little bit of, people not quite believing what
That's
they
right.
say because of what's gone on.
Right.
And so what I advise companies to do, again, it comes down to good storytelling, is to go back and, tell the stories of the people who make your clothes, show people how they're made, and tell them that you want to do better. That's the message. And people, they will root for you in that way if they think that you wanted to do better, and you'll have a pathway to do it rather than misleading them. And as I said, I don't think people who say that they're totally transparent, is very far and few between.
Yeah. I'd
It'll
almost
be,
rather they be
yeah,
honest and say, we are striving for this, and this is
yeah,
the factory we use, than for them to say, oh,
But
we're
proving,
100% ethical and
yeah, but
yeah,
proving what they
yeah,
can. I mean, that's so interesting what you
yeah.
say, Trish, because we just had a recent episode regarding greenwashing versus green hushing. And
Yeah.
I
yeah,
agree. I think that partial narrative,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We either are sustainable or we keep our mouths shut.
yeah,
We're going to get into
exactly.
trouble
Yeah.
versus saying we're going to bring to light our best efforts and we're going to support it with hyperlinks to our primary evidence and resource and all that with the storytelling. But then to say, yet more work needs to be done. Okay,
Yeah,
right? And yet these challenges
Mm.
remain and even tell the story about the challenges and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
That makes them way more
Overcome those
trustworthy to me. I would
Yeah.
trust them more if they're saying that.
Yeah,
Because trust is very fragile,
Yeah.
especially with a brand. And whenever you were like talking about AI earlier, you said you're currently integrating AI with artisanal and ancestral knowledge. How can technology support rather than replace cultural wisdom and regenerative practices?
Yeah, this is a huge subject. One of the things that I mean, I think that with AI, basically when it first came out, I think a lot of people, there was a lot of fear mongering around in the design world and even in the NGO world as to whether some underserved communities would be, not getting access, would be marginalized. But there is a equity that can come with AI as well. For us, our tools, one of the stumbling blocks for the tools and things that we build, the regenerative programs and trainings that we do, was the fact that when we went somewhere rural, we'd have to use what we call the train the trainer model, which was we would have our tools, we would train somebody from an NGO about the tools, and then they would go to the local community and then train somebody else who knew the dialect, and then they would train somebody else. A huge chain, lots of energy and time consuming, something that they did in the UN for years and years and years, and not very effective really, because it's really hard to measure all that thing. Once it's implemented, how do you measure it? And the language barrier. And so what we found now is AI has helped with really local dialects that are very, very rural. People are creating repositories of those old dialects. So it helps, basically, it cuts out like a whole load of people. So they can have access to tools and the communication that was always taking such a long time, and help that they needed easily. And now with AI as it's going, they will probably maybe even be able to just directly integrate AI into some of the projects that they're doing, because there will be language models around their dialects and some of the things that they're doing. We at Hecho Nosotros building a repository of ancient wisdom, first starting with Latin America, but we've been working with another girl called Juliana Leshoro, and she is in Kenya, and she's been working with the Yaku people in Kenya, in the Makodo, I think, forests in the north. And she's preserving ancient wisdom and ancient dialects and creating, using AI to create a repository of all the stuff that's going in there. So I think that it's got many uses. It can speed up things. I've heard of projects with villages where people have been able just to build when things are broken. They're able to fix them without having to wait months and months and months because of AI. It's just, it has made it's transformative for a lot of places in the world. And so I think there's a lot of good that could be done with AI in terms of social impact. So I'm currently writing a course on AI tools and social impact, and super interesting, all of the stuff that I've had to sort of think about as I write that course. But
example,
like I said, I feel like it has some really really good good things that can be done.
Positive, very positive, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the merging or the coming together of like heritage and tradition and old craft with AI, like bringing those together is such an
because for
amazing
preservation's
way.
sake as well,
Yeah.
because of the migration of a lot of peoples around the world, a lot of old ancient wisdom and crafts have been lost, even ancient medicine. And so it's a good way to kind of preserve those, to keep things together, for future generations. Because not everybody wants to use those skills, but maybe we may end up going back to those skills, at least not losing how to do them as well, because it used to be multi-generational, and now sort of the last generation of weavers are there, the last generation of people being, are there because, that generation wants to go to the city and it's other things.
Yeah.
And so, there's things to be preserved.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're preparing a class on that. So I wanted to ask you about education and the next generation because they're the future leaders. So what skills or mindsets do you think are most critical for teaching, future sustainability leaders and they're going to be the ones taking over for us. And so what are some of the skills and mindsets that you think are critical for them to learn?
I mean, when in all my classes that I teach, I always talk about nature systems thinking, how it's really important to look at nature. I teach a class in biomimicry, which is basically, looking to nature for answers and looking how efficient nature is, and people designing around, nature systems. And so, like the bullet train in Tokyo was built around biomimicry, looking at the way certain things fly. Some of the suits that you see for swimmers and diving, they looked at sharks. So I think that, I'd like to teach people about how things are all connected, how nature is really efficient. I think that they need to think about cultural humility and listening, having really good listening skills, because that's really essential, because, you learn from listening. Like I said, I'm a proponent of design thinking, which is all about listening and talking and listening to people and designing around what you hear and what you see and what you observe. And be comfortable with technology without losing all the ethics and your creativity. So understanding that technology is something to be integrated, but at the same time, understanding there is ethics, there is intellectual property. There's a way to use it as another tool for creativity, but not it to be the be all, the be all of it. I was talking to somebody else, ex-Intel guy, Sassy Jane, he was telling me that he thought that AI should be a teammate. That's part of it. They put their 2 cents worth in, but they're not everything.
Yeah, a great
and
way
I
to
also,
look at it. Yeah.
yeah, and I also like the idea of collaboration over competition, mindset of responsibility, being adaptable, and thinking long term, which is what sustainability is. It's just thinking long term instead of short term. What's the impacts of what happens,
Yeah.
down the road.
Well, Trish, I know something about you just because I know you for many years. And you teach also about making fabric, growing fabric. So
Yeah.
could you just touch on that just a little bit? Because I mean, there are so many
Yeah.
advances in material development, but you have some really exciting things that you work on that would be
I
great for you
mean,
to
there's
share.
some fantastic things. I mean, I get my students to grow kombucha leather, which is that drink kombucha, that little slimy thing at the bottom. You can use that to kind of grow into a leather, and all the stuff that we have, food waste, fruit, vegetables, all of those have potential to become biomaterials. You can essentially make fabric out of anything, and I've done a class on this. It's super fun, where you gather all waste and you can make these materials. Now, the issue with some of these materials is scaling up. How do you gather enough? If you're using mace materials, it's the logistics of collecting all of that waste and keeping it at a certain temperature and doing stuff. This is where it kind of becomes a little bit difficult. So you have to kind of be selective. You can get super excited about biomaterials because you can make it from so many things. But then you have to kind of pick and choose of what is really viable. What can you really scale up? Okay. Yeah. And again, as I say to my students, just because something is biodegradable and sustainable, the end product, what happened previously to get you there? Did you use a ton of fossil fuels? Did somebody not get paid properly? You need to kind of think about that as well. And I know I said that, it can be incremental, but we still need to think about that as we go forward with all of those materials. when you have that end product that is fantastic, that's made out of cactus or banana peel, you know, we need to trace back to make sure that whatever was done is
Yeah, they
good.
weren't.
Yeah.
There's that circularity,
and we're thinking about that.
ideas.
And that's why we have a problem with rayon and viscose. You know, it comes
Yeah.
from trees, you strip the trees and then a ton of chemicals go in there. And
Yeah.
So maybe it's slightly better but it's got all of the things that
Still adding all that. Yeah.
is not good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because people think bamboo is better,
Yeah.
but it's not, because it actually uses more chemicals.
Yeah, and it's highly invasive as well.
Yeah.
I mean, like I was talking about water hyacinth, how, you know, it can take over, you know, and then you affect the biodiversity of a place, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know, you've got to be careful. Go ahead.
Sorry, and you're currently writing a book now, aren't you, about about fabrics?
Yeah, fabrics and batik. Yeah. So I've been working on this for a few years, but it's just I think that, you know, like I said, I talk about artisanal crafts and things like that. There are some that will always be popular, like silk screening, weaving. But there's some forgotten things, you know, and I think batik is one of them. You know, it's a good way to put images onto fabric. There's patience required, so perhaps that's why it hasn't been so popular. But I like to talk about it because it's in many cultures. It's in Africa, it's in Japan, it's in, you know, I think it's a very beautiful craft. And I think that it's one that, again, like I said, flies a little bit under the radar. And so, you know, I've been working on collecting information around it. And hopefully we'll put it into a book where it's got some easy ways for people to find things accessible.
And a good how-to, so people can do it themselves at home.
Yeah, you know, I'm pro analog as well. You know, I like a good book to kind of to go with everything that I do digitally as well.
Yeah.
You know.
So just to like wrap up, we are what?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
So at the end of each of our episodes, we always ask our guests if they have a call to action for our listeners, like what they can do to, you know, achieve your mission or to learn or whatever. What would you say to our listeners?
I would say sustainability is not about perfection. You know, it's not about, you're not going to get it in this perfect sense of, you know, every aspect of your value chain is going to be perfectly sustainable. But it really is about participation. When business and policymakers are given the tools and education and have aligned incentives around circularity, regenerative kind of systems, I think we can kind of move the needle a little bit. Like I said, it's a systems change. So my call to action really is policymakers, businesses, schools, educators. We need to kind of align together, and even scientists as well. Science and creativity, it's whole different subjects, but you know, we were once together and now we've pulled away. But the arts and science have got a lot to learn from each other. And so I feel like, you know, we need a little bit more collaboration, a little bit more of a shared language. I think, again, this is where AI can come in, you know, some really interesting trainings can come around science and fashion, you know. So, I mean, I think that, you know, moving forward, that shared language, those shared initiatives are what we need.
I know we're about to wrap up, but one thing I'm very curious about, Trish, is you're obviously very impassioned about these all these topics, and I'm wondering what continues to inspire you to care so much about this issue. Since you could be doing 100 different things in your life, why this? Why do you care so much?
Well, yeah, I do 100 different things probably.
Yeah.
Why this? I don't know. I mean, when I was a textile designer, you know, we had a company, and I can sort of remember once sitting in I was showing the collection, and somebody came back and showed one of the designs that I did, and they said, "Yeah, we're bringing it everywhere, and we're mass producing it, blah blah blah." And I sort of thought, I'm thinking about, an advocate for sustainability, but I am part of the problem here. I am designing something that is going to be mass produced with fossil fuels and everything, and maybe we won't get paid. And I don't want to be there, I want to be on the other side of that, and I want to make people aware, and I don't mean just people, adults and things. I mean, I've always said this, and I'll say it again. When we are younger, we are told about the food pyramid. We're told about food and how it's healthy, and yet people don't know where their clothes come from. They don't know that cotton is grown, and this goes all the way up to fashion students. Some people not understanding that rayon comes from trees. We aren't taught that. We aren't taught. We're taught the basics about food and shelter, but not our clothing that goes on our biggest organ, skin.
Those are ingredients that we're wearing.
Our skin is our biggest organ, and we put petroleum on it. We're not told that. And so, my kid knows about organic food since he was, 4 or 5. He's grown up and understands healthy food, but he doesn't understand unhealthy clothing. He doesn't understand that. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like a very, a basic level, we ought to kind of at least instill just the basics about textiles, because it's a huge industry. It's what we wear. And so that's what gets me up, just making sure that people understand that.
Great. So education is the key.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, anything else, colleagues, you want to ask Trish?
I'll just throw in another follow-up to what Trish just said, is if you are purchasing a rayon garment, or you're about to buy something and you don't know, you see the fabric content, but you're not sure really where that comes from, just quickly Google it and you'll see if it's petroleum based, or you'll see if it's, man-made or organic or whatnot. So it's just kind of, again, I do that with my food. Now there's like
people do with their food.
There's an app.
But people with their clothing, they'll just take it off the rack and not even think about it.
There's an app I use for food, and you scan the QR code on the back and it'll rate it. And you're like, okay, it's marketed as healthy, low fat, blah, blah, blah. And then you look at it, it's like all these oils. And it's the same for clothes, is just look at, is it petroleum based? It's like those hidden hydrogenated,
you need to
whatever
change it.
oils.
The food industry has done such a fantastic job at educating people on what, healthy food, organic food. And yet, we've done a really poor job of educating people about clothing. There's been campaigns, but it hasn't got into the system enough.
I think because people are so disconnected, whenever, the convenience of just ordering in means people are disconnected with cooking to understand the ingredients. And it's the same where people used to make their own clothing. So because clothing is so cheap, they just go and buy, and it's that convenience that makes them disconnected, because people don't know the difference between a $500 shirt and a $20 shirt, and what makes the difference.
Exactly.
So Trish, I know also you teach here, you're based here in Portland, and you teach in actual classrooms. So where could people find you? And then I know you do a lot of online webinars and panel talks and things like that. So, do you have anything coming up that?
We have a forum, high-level political forum, which is coming up on the 22nd of April. Where we'll be talking about artisanal intelligence and AI, and how that integration works. We also, for me, if you want to find me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with anybody who's interested in sustainability and collaborations. I teach a lot of classes. Have a lot of projects upcoming, too many to mention.
To even remember, we'll put all the links in the show notes for anyone that's interested.
And okay, and as we ask all our guests, who are you wearing today? No, we don't have podcast. So, well, thank you so much for this enlightening and inspiring conversation. And to our viewers and our listeners, if you like what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe, spread the word, but also send us a message as to what topics you'd like us to explore in the future with guests like Trish Langman. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Trish.
Bye.
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 That's it for today's episode of The Fashion Situation Room.
Thanks for spending time with us on the front lines of fashion.
If you found value in this conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps us bring more meaningful voices to the table.
And what call to action did you take? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.